Yeah, I want to talk about the Mexican corn dilemma, and I want to use this story as as a explanation of how scary our food supply is in this world. So the Mexicans have been complaining is that they don't want to buy this genetically modified yellow corn from the Americans to feed their population. They realize that it's of low nutritional value and a lot of it was grown for animal feed and for biofuels. So this dilemma of this, let's call it second-rate corn being sold to the Mexicans to feed them is very frustrating because the Mexican population is showing the telltale sign of eating this very, very weak food and paying the price for it. So Mexico put themselves in a bit of a spot. They complained they didn't want to buy this corn, but it just so happens they had a horrible year in corn production. Mexico City and surrounding areas was incredibly dry. They lost a lot of the corn crops. It was a really bad year, so they have to depend on other nations to supply them with corn at a price, obviously. Now, China stopped giving Mexico corn for some reason. They needed it themselves, and they, on top of that, started buying up all the corn from Brazil. Brazil probably had some type of debt with China, so they get served first. So it's a very intricate marketplace where you can really learn a lot for future food supply. What happens is people have to keep relationships going because you never know when you're going to have a bad year. So Mexico now has very few options. They have to buy this genetically modified corn to feed their people. So this global interconnectivity is very interesting and makes a really good example of how food is going to be very, very complicated. How to feed the world is going to be very complicated. So what happens is I think the dependency on smaller gardens is going to grow. I hope they can get some water from somewhere to keep their operations going, but they might be an integral part of keeping the world fed. This US-Mexico battle is interesting because when you have no other option, you're kind of dependent on the other person. So it's good timing for the US, really bad timing for Mexico. Now, the Mexican people have to be very cautious because their health is really declining. The Americans and everywhere around the world too. But when you have a really strict corn diet, very popular corn diet, it has real effects on your population, diabetes, overweight. All those things are part of a diet where the corn itself has very little nutritional value, and the modification, you don't really know what that does to the human body. So everything is very tricky. Everything is very hard to understand. This marketplace of selling corn, buying corn, using it for pharmaceuticals, using it for biofuels, feeding the cows with it. This dynamic of a crop is very interesting because it possibly allows American farmers to grow a lesser quality corn that is not really intended for human consumption. So there's a lot of dynamics that's really hard to figure out, but this video is just giving us an idea that there are problems with food supplies around the world. They're very dependent on who's involved, who has the money, who doesn't have the money, what that raw product is used for. So it's a very flexible, dynamic, intricate process of this food being distributed and dealing with these massive crop failures. And it's a very dynamic mixture. And that's what is very scary about the world. What happens is if we have these temperatures increasing, drought happening everywhere, the fallback on other countries, in this case this year it's Brazil and US, might not be there. And then governments have to really struggle to figure out how they're going to feed their people. So very dynamic, very interesting, and it really shows everyone that these small scale gardeners that can produce really good food need to be kept alive and need to flourish so that they can supply these little, you know, spots in the supply and demand curve that aren't being fulfilled.